Quick spoiler warning for the Name of the Wind and the Wise Men's Fear. You're gonna want to read both of those. Denna is one of the most frustratingly mysterious characters I've ever read. Honestly, the thing I want to know most about Denna is who her mysterious patron is, because I feel like this will reveal a lot about Denna's motives, and just help us understand her some more. So today I'll be looking at 3 specific theories, starting with the theory that her patron is a member of the Chandrian. This is probably the most believed theory out there. Next, I'll be looking at the possibility of him being bred in Kvothe's tack-playing friend from Vintus. And finally, I'll be looking at him being a member of the Amir, the theory that I personally think is true. Before getting into it, I want to quickly mention my Etsy shop where I design and sell bookish-related things like bookmarks and prints. I have a few Kingkiller Chronicle related things in there, as well as a bunch of others. I also designed the poster you see behind me, which I just framed like 5 minutes ago. So if you'd like some cool bookmarks or just want to buy a friend a gift, I'll leave a link in the description below. So let's start off by listing some things we know about her patron. Denna meets her patron at the Eolian while she waits to have lunch with Kvothe. However, he never shows up due to the fire in the university's fishery, where he saves Fella. Now when Kvothe does show up late, Dioch tells him that Denna left with a white-haired gentleman. We don't really get too much more information on her patron until Kvothe meets Denna in Trebin after the massacre at the Mothan farm. They're looking for her patron when Denna inadvertently consumes some denner resin, the highly addictive drug taken from the sap of a denner tree. While under the effect of the resin, Denna admits that her patron knocked her unconscious at the Mothan farm. He explains how it would be suspicious if she was found to be the only one who survived. He also makes sure that it's what she really wants, and even gets her to ask him to hit her. Now for those out there who believe that her patron is a member of the Chandrian, some people seem to think this is kind of a sadistic thing, where he's making her beg to be hit. But then again, it could be that he's genuinely scared for her safety and this is the only other option. Her patron is very secretive, putting her through tests to prove her loyalty, and Denna is very tight-lipped about him. At one point, Kvothe jokes around trying to guess her patron's name, when suddenly a gust of wind sends an ash tree leaf into his mouth, and he settles on a name for him. The wind has decided for us, Master Ash. Soon after, they get closer to the charred remains of the Mothan farm, and some ash blows into Denna's eye. So this name seems to be kind of symbolic in some way, and we know that Kvothe does have a natural affinity to naming things. Then later in the Wise Men's Fear, we find out Denna lost contact with her patron for around a month since the Mothan farm incident. She then disappears, presumably with her patron, and most likely to Yil, where she learns Yilish knots, and she writes letters to Kvothe from here. Kvothe later meets her in Severin, where she tells him she has an official right of patronage, and is working with Master Ash. We also discover that Master Ash is helping her find historical information, and that after searching through genealogies for her patron, she writes a song about the hero Lanre, which she then sings to Kvothe. And this drastically contradicts Scarpi's story about Lanre being a tragedy, with him becoming Haliax, the leader of the Chandrian. Denna's version paints him as a hero. Kvothe, of course, tells her how wrong she is, and things get a bit heated. Later on, when Kvothe is in the Fey Realm, the Kvothe has a bit to say about Denna's patron.
He beats her, you know, her patron. Not all the time, but often. Sometimes in a temper, but mostly it's a game to him. How far can he go before she cries? How far can he push her before she tries to leave and he has to lure her back again? It's nothing grotesque, mind you. No burns, nothing that will leave a scar. Not yet. 2 days ago, he used his walking stick. That was new. Welts the size of your thumb under her clothes, bruises down to the bone. Poor girl, she's tied to him so tight. Thinks that's all she's good for. Wouldn't leave him even if you asked. Which you wouldn't. You, so careful. Scared of startling her away. And, well, you should be too. She's a runner, that one.
So, keeping all of this in mind, let's look at the possibility of her patron being one of the Chandrian. We know the Chandrian are also very secretive, presumably working towards hiding all evidence of their existence. Denna's patron is also very secretive. She doesn't even know if she knows his real name, and she doesn't share the name she does know with Kvothe. Now, Master Ash being one of the Chandrian is probably the most common theory in the fanbase, with most people believing he's Cinder, and I'll admit there's quite a few clues to support this theory. When Kvothe was jokingly trying to guess the patron's name, we can see Ferul hidden. and this we suspect is the true name of Cinder, which derives from an Adam poem. Ferul, chill and dark of eye. We've also seen Haliax call him by Ferula, causing him to stagger in pain and giving Haliax some type of control over him. Little interesting fact to consider, ferule in English is a flat-end ruler used to punish children, while ferula in Latin means rod or cane. This can possibly relate to the walking stick the Kvothe mentions. Now, as far as looks, Cinder also has white hair. That's about as far as their similarities in appearance goes. I mean, Cinder has some inherently odd features. Not only does he have the curly white hair, but he also has white porcelain skin and pure black eyes. And I would hope that Dioch, when describing who Denna left with, would have mentioned to Kvothe that the man had pure black eyes and the ability to chill the air around him. This is one of the problems I have with this theory, but some people have brought up that it could be some type of glamour effect to hide his appearance, like Bast uses. Denna also mentions that her patron has a way of letting her know he's around. Maybe this is Cinder's sign of, like, frost and cold, or maybe it's some other Chandrian sign. Speaking of which, it's interesting that when Denna was at the Eolian meeting her patron, Kvothe was dealing with a fire in the fishery that was caused by a canister of bone tar which became unnaturally cold, so much so it was frosted and ate through the metal. The fact that Kvothe was so unnerved about the frost makes me think this was set up by somebody. Now, this next part kind of is a bit of an obvious one, but Kvothe naming him Master Ash, with Cinder being kind of close to Ash, well, it could be another clue. Which leads me back to what the Kvothe said about Denna's patron, how he beats her with his walking stick. Now, Cinder is known to be exceptionally cruel. You only need to reread the passage where Kvothe's troop is killed to see this. Plus, maybe he now has to use a walking stick due to his injuries in the Eld Forest, as Martin shot an arrow in his thigh. But interestingly enough, right before the Kvothe goes on about Denna's patron, and I mean like the paragraph right before, he talks about Cinder.
Maybe this Cinder did me a bad turn once. Maybe it amuses me to set a young pup like you snapping at his heels. Why can't you find this Cinder? Well, that's an interesting why. You'd think a man with coal-black eyes would make an impression when he stops to buy a drink. How can it be that you haven't managed to catch wind of him in all this time? That's right. I suppose you don't need me to tell you what he looks like. You've seen him just a day or 3 ago. Don't feel bad you didn't recognize him. They have a lot of experience hiding those telltale signs. Not your fault at all. It's been a long time. Years. Besides, you've been busy currying favor, rolling around in the cushions with some pixie, sating your base desires.
It's definitely interesting that the Kvothe spoke about these two so close together. I also have to mention the song that Denna sang about Lanray. Could this have been planted by Cinder to try and rewrite the wrongs of what the Chandrian did to Mir Terinial and the Urgan Empire? This theory that Denna's patron is one of the Chandrian is the theory that I was 100% for when I first read through the series. But let's move on and talk about Master Ash being breaded. While staying in the mayor's court, Kvothe meets Bredin, who teaches him the court customs of Vintus, as well as a game called Tack. He's an older gentleman with white hair, which is how Denna describes her patron. On their first meeting, he mentions to Kvothe how he loves to travel and that he's recently taken up dancing. We know Master Ash travels a lot, and also Denna mentions that he's a dancer. Also something to note, when Bredin leaves Severin to visit family, Denna also happens to leave at the same time. Bredin's house colors are mentioned as being ash gray and dark charcoal. Master Ash, maybe? Also, he carries a walking stick, so there's that too. Also, there's court rumors that Bredin does some weird pagan crap in the woods, which could be some Chandrian thing. Like I said, I don't really think Master Ash is a Chandrian, but I do think he's Bredin, and I think what Bredin does in the woods has to do with the Greystones. I could see the people of Vintus being superstitious about this, and I just have a gut feeling the Greystones will come into play more in the 3rd book. Denna also mentions that Kvothe could have already met her patron while staying in the mayor's court, and with Bredin not really being too important to the plot as of yet, but having a significant amount of time, I think he's her patron. Also, when he first meets Kvothe, he mentions that his interest in Kvothe is for mutual benefit, and I'm not really sure what he's benefiting from so far. In one of Rothfuss's blog posts, he speaks about his early draft for the Wise Men's Fear, and he says that Vachette and Bredin didn't exist at all. Some people think this is evidence that Breton cannot be Master Ash unless he is Cinder, as there's so many clues leading to him being Cinder in the first book before Breton even existed. Personally, I think this is more of an excuse for Breton to be the patron and not Cinder, because honestly I think Rothfuss is fooling us, much like the Kvothe with Kvothe, to go after Cinder. I think he's using a ton of red herrings to make us think that Denna's patron is Cinder. Which leads me to the final theory, the one that I think is true, that Master Ash is also Breton, and that he's a member of the Emir. My confidence in this theory could be completely wrong. I mean, watch him end up being a Chandrian when the third book comes out, but to me, the idea of Master Ash being Cinder just doesn't quite add up. It just seems kind of sloppy to me. I don't see Cinder sitting around in the mayor's court playing a gentleman. I don't think his character has that much control. If Cinder's Breton, Kvothe would have noticed his Chandrian signs, as they can't hide their signs. There's also the fact that Denna never actually says anything bad about her patron, and we don't actually know that he abuses her. Yes, there is what the Kvothe says, and the Kvothe can only tell the truth, but we also know the Kvothe is creepy and manipulative. Could it be that her patron beating her with his walking stick is actually training her in combat? There's actually kind of some evidence for this. While in Severin, Kvothe follows Denna to an alley where he sees her threaten a man at knife point who is about to rape a young woman. That was pretty bold of Denna. She even gives the young lady some advice afterwards. I think we need to give Denna some more credit. She's not just some Mary Sue, she's a runner, and she's had problems with guys in the past. That's why she runs, so I can't really see her sticking around with an abusive patron. If her patron is actually helping her, the Kvothe's words have convinced Kvothe otherwise. And he was already suspicious of this patron, and I mean, think about it, if the Kvothe wants Kvothe to kill Master Ash, and if he was Cinder, the Kvothe would have just told Kvothe that he's Cinder. We know Kvothe would have been furious, but instead the Kvothe is manipulating the truth to get that same effect in Kvothe. He's not really lying, but just kind of putting a twist on the truth. And I could totally see the Kvothe trying to set him up for destruction by attacking an Emir. Which, by the way, kind of related, Breton's house colors are comparable to the ashen grey robes used by the Tellin Church, which could be a clue that he's an Emir. Now, high-ranking Emir are called Siridae, and basically any action they take can be seen as for the greater good, meaning they can take some pretty severe actions and get away with it. With this in mind, Master Ash knocking Denna unconscious at the and farm to protect her could be seen as justifiable and for the greater good. One problem I do have with this theory, however, is why would an Emir get Denna to write a song about Lanray being a hero? I mean, maybe he's trying to draw the Chandrian into a trap, but if you think about it, there isn't any proof that Master Ash wrote the song. He's been helping her find historical information, but that doesn't mean he approves of Denna's song. Actually, when Denna returns to Severin, she never mentions the song again, and she kinda acts like that didn't even happen with Kvothe, so maybe her patron told her to stop singing it. But think about it this way, maybe Denna is like a parallel of Kvothe. Perhaps her family or someone she loved was killed by the Chandrian, and now she's training with an Emir to track them down. This could actually be why she returned to the Mothan farm, not just to look for her patron, but maybe to investigate the Chandrian's presence. Also, her patron is teaching her Yillish knots, which we know have some type of magical effect, so maybe this could be used against the Chandrian. Let me know who you think Denna's patron is down below. Personally, I would be kind of disappointed if he did end up being a Chandrian, even though there's a lot of clues leading to that. I just feel like it's kind of predictable, like the main baddie is also the patron of the protagonist's love interest. I don't know, it could still be the case, but let me know what you think down below. Maybe you have an entirely different theory, and maybe you have some clues to add to this theory that I didn't put in this video. Also, if you want some cool bookmarks, make sure to check out my Etsy shop, which I'll link down below. I also link all of the artwork that I use in the video, as well as all the theories that I got the inspiration to make this video from. And also check the links below for all the artists and theory makers. I don't claim credit for any of the art or for the theories.